Rain started before I reached the door, but I kept walking, shoulders pressed forward, head low. The week's assignment, build a prototype, demonstrate an innovation, was piled awkwardly in my arms, shielded by a crumpled jacket. My hands shook not just from the cold, but from nerves. These critiques were always intimidating, but lately, the professors in Madrid's old technological institute seemed less interested in potential, more in entertainment, someone to prod, then smirk at. Inside the studio, heat pressed in with the tang of solder and rubber. Fluorescent light revealed the other students. Jame hunched over a half-assembled drone, Pillar on the stool, tapping her foot, notebook shut tight. They barely looked at me. Professor Rojo, in his tattered brown suit, sat at the center desk. The air was thick with that tense hush before beginnings. I placed my project, a skeletal, gangly robot, on the table. It wobbled slightly, its plastic joints grinning like missing teeth. Myriad comments about child's toys and recycled tin had battered me all semester. I took a breath and flicked the little switch on its side. The robot shakily lifted an arm, fingers splayed. "All right, Alvaro," Rojo announced, voice ringing with disinterest, "show us your latest miracle." I explained how the servo motors mimicked human dexterity, how sensors in the fingertips could eventually allow for grasping delicate objects. My voice was low but steady. As the robot's hand encircled a small plastic cube, I pressed my point. This system could one day replicate human touch. Rojo clicked his tongue, but for what? Pick up tomatoes in a grocery shop, laughter rippled through the rows. It's not just groceries, this technology could help with delicate surgeries or elderly care. Pillar's voice sliced in, who would trust this stick man with their grandmother? It looks like a Halloween prop. Jame joined, and you want someone to invest millions in this, might as well ask for a fortune to build Lego men. A giggle from the back, Rojo pressed on. You have ambition, Alvaro, but not a single understanding of limits or even the market. This is a waste of time and university resources. I recommend you reconsider your obsession. My throat tightened. I stared down at my trembling hands. The urge to argue pressed up, but the room had decided already. Their cruel mirth lingered even as I gathered my creation and retreated to the window. Rain hammered the glass. The city outside blurred, neon and grey. In my chest, humiliation burned like fever. Even so, a strange calm settled over me, a kind of clarity that arrives after a breaking point. If they wouldn't believe, I'd have to prove it to myself, nothing more. That night I returned to my flat in Vallecas and placed the robot, a limp heap now, onto my desk. My sister Anna, with stacks of law textbooks on the sofa, looked up. Her silence was softer than the studio's, her doubts less cruel. How was critique? I told her the truth and nothing more. She pressed a mug of tea into my hand. If you quit, we both know it'll haunt you forever. Even if you don't show anyone else, finish what you've started. That tea, hot and cheap, steadying me, became a small anchor in the storm. After graduating, I sent resumes everywhere, Barcelona, Munich, even as far as Tokyo. Most were ignored, a handful called. One let me write a technical exam, which I botched, hands too slick with panic. Madrid, though beautiful in the evenings, became a labyrinth of closed doors and tight mouths. My parents asked when I'd give up the robotics fantasy and study something reliable like programming. Neighborhood friends, the ones who'd wrestled bottle caps with me as a kid, would nudge me in bars. "So where's your Iron Man now, genius?" Always loud enough for everyone to hear. Anna kept believing, or she pretended to. When I landed a temp job soldering circuit boards for home appliances, it felt like a betrayal of everything I'd dreamed. My desk overlooked an alley. I earned enough to help pay bills, but I hung onto my prototypes, working evenings at my desk, sketching and sketching. Some weekends, Anna and I took the metro north, where the real research parks glimmered beyond glass barriers. I'd flatten myself against those windows to peer in at engineers testing drones and exosuits, evidence that someone somewhere saw the promise in machines with hands. One spring evening, years into this routine, as Madrid buzzed with distant celebrations for San Isidro, I sent another email. A speculative one attaching a video demo and a redesign of my very first project, a humble, dexterous robot hand but now sturdy, fitted for real tasks. The subject line: affordable prosthetic proposal. It went to a tiny startup in Chamartín, one that posted about open developer nights and hackathons. To my shock, someone replied. The founder, Gabriela, met me in a borrowed office. Her clothes were threadbare, but her eyes didn't drift to their phones as I spoke. She poked at the prototype, flexed the fingers, asked about the actuators. "We don't have real funding," she said. "But if you want to stay for late-night pizza and help us run user tests, consider this your second interview." Those months blurred into each other, late nights lit by fluorescent bulbs, the buzz of excitement for each new breakthrough. I worked with a team for the first time. We cobbled together funds, convinced a university to lend us 3D printers. Our solution, cheap, modular robot hands for amputees, attracted the attention of a venture group, then another. There were more rejections, public ones too, judges at competitions with icy faces, investors who took meetings only to scoff. "No one will pay for this. There's no Spanish robotics industry." "Do social media, not hardware." Gabriela laughed each time, sometimes through tears, vowing we'd be the first. We kept at it. One day, after a night of debugging, I watched a 9-year-old named Pedro strap on our latest prototype. It flexed as he thought, moving almost as naturally as his remaining hand. He dropped a toy soldier, then gasped when he picked it up again, all plastic fingers curled. His mother's eyes filled with tears and hope and shock all at once. Gabriela squeezed my arm. "See, not so ridiculous now." 3 more years passed before our first factory opened. We named the product Mano Libra and began fitting them in hospitals, first in Madrid, then elsewhere. The newspapers ran stories. Antenna 3 interviewed me, from outcast engineer to prosthetics innovator. My parents sent me silent, hesitant texts filled with punctuation and hearts. It was autumn when I received the Alumni Association email, a new technology showcase at the Institute, inviting graduates to present to current students and staff. The invitation was mass-emailed, impersonal, but my name, now known, somehow was on the list of special guests. Pilar's name was there too. She was a consultant now, apparently. Professor Rojo would moderate. For days I wrestled with whether to reply. It wasn't anger exactly. I wasn't sure what it was, grief for who I'd been or fear that in returning I'd become that broken student once again. But Anna insisted, "Go. You already know who you are, let them find out." On the morning of the showcase, the city was muted and grey. I wore a suit slightly too big. I had never learned to dress the part. Gabriela urged me to bring Pedro, now 12 and newly confident, his Mano Libra painted in the colours of Atletico Madrid. A hush clung to the Institute's halls. Echoes of old taunts flickered in the corners. The main atrium had been polished for the event. Tables displayed gadgets, a telepresence drone here, a VR app there, but nothing like the rough prototypes of our student years. Pilar stood talking to investors. She noticed me, eyes flicking over my suit then away, as if uncertain quite where I belonged. Rojo greeted me with his familiar clipped smile. "So, you're back. Heard you're doing something with prosthetics." "Robotics for rehabilitation," I replied, matching his formality. He nodded. "Well, you have your slot at 1. Try to leave time for questions." When it came, I found my hands steady. I described Mano Libra in plain words, how we iterated, brought costs down, how users shaped the design. I referenced Pedro, who grinned and waved to the crowd, flexing bright blue fingers. Then I did what frightened me most. I asked for a volunteer, someone to slip on the demo arm. Silence. Pilar, perhaps motivated by skepticism or misplaced bravado, stood. She approached with her brisk walk, skeptical as ever. I fitted the device onto her forearm, made sure straps were tight. At my nod, she curled each digit, then picked up a delicate glass bulb from the table, a task my first prototype could never have managed. The hand, guided by intuitive pressure sensors, adapted seamlessly. The crowd drew in, whispering. Pilar set the bulb down, then flexed the wrist. Her stance wavered. Gone was the dismissiveness, replaced by a kind of awe. This is real," she said quietly, as if to herself. Rojo brushed at his tie. How did you stabilize the movement?" I answered simply, describing years of struggle and iteration, lessons learned solo, then in teams, then at the factory. I told them how ridicule built resilience, how our city now hosted a robotics workforce. The applause at the end wasn't wild, but it was honest, lingering well after I wrapped up. Students flocked to me with questions, not jibes. Pilar found her way over later, shook my hand and said, "I'm sorry. I was wrong." The words burned into me, not with pride, but a release I hadn't known I carried. Outside, evening stormed through the city. I lingered on the steps facing Gran Via. Anna met me there, shoving her umbrella into my hand. "So," she asked. "It's strange," I said. "It healed something, but I don't feel triumphant, just lighter." She smiled. "Sometimes you build the thing you needed, and fixing the world is just extra." We stood in the drizzle, watching the city bustle. The years of struggle, of feeling ridiculous and rejected, didn't vanish. They knitted into my story as real and necessary as every machine I'd built. I had come home, proven my work to the people who once mocked it. But more powerful was this ordinary moment, back in the streets of Madrid where I first dared to believe. A return not as someone seeking validation, but as someone who knew, deeply, quietly, that he was enough.